You are 20 years old the first time you lie to a man with a rifle. It happens in a bakery line on a morning so cold the windows have gone white at the edges. Every time the door opens, winter slips inside and brushes the backs of your ankles. The place smells like flour, wet wool, and the sour impatience of people who have been hungry too long. A woman behind the counter cuts bread with the care of a surgeon. No crumb is accidental anymore. Nothing is wasted. Even the old man in front of you counts his coins twice before he lets them go. Behind you, a German soldier taps ash from his cigarette onto the floor as if the floor belongs to him. Maybe it does now. In your pocket is a folded scrap of paper no larger than a postage stamp. 3 names, 1 address, the departure time of a train carrying ammunition east. You have read it enough times to memorize it, but you haven't thrown it away yet, which means it can still kill you. The soldier asks why you're buying so much bread. You turn. He is young, younger than you expected Germans to be when they first came marching through town. His cheeks are pink from the cold. He looks bored more than cruel, which somehow makes him more dangerous. Cruel men are visible. Bored men improvise. You feel the note in your pocket like a second heartbeat. My mother has guests, you say. It is not a good lie. It is too ordinary, too small. But that is exactly why he believes it. Heroic lies get people killed. Ordinary lies survive inspection. He studies your face, searching for something interesting, but there is nothing there except a tired young person buying bread for a house that no longer eats enough. He waves you forward. The woman behind the counter hands you the loaf. Her fingers touch yours for half a second. Nothing passes between you. No glance, no signal. But she knows, or suspects. In occupied towns, suspicion becomes its own language. You leave with the bread under your arm and the paper still in your pocket. And that is how it begins. Not with a gunshot, not with a manifesto, not with a sudden burst of courage and music swelling in the distance. It begins with bread, with a door closing behind you, with the discovery that fear can stand up inside your body and still allow you to speak. At first, your work is so small it almost feels insulting. You carry messages you are not allowed to read. You memorize routes. You count trucks. You notice which roads are searched at dawn and which guards drink too much after dark. You begin paying attention to things that once seemed too boring to matter. Muddy tire tracks, a shutter left open on a Tuesday, a church bell rung once instead of twice, a bicycle leaning outside a house where no bicycle should be. Before the occupation, you did not think of yourself as observant. You thought history belonged to important people and brave people and men in uniforms. You thought your life would be made of school, work, marriage, perhaps children, perhaps disappointment in manageable portions. Then war arrived, and suddenly details became destiny. The man who recruits you calls himself Marcel, though you are almost certain that is not his real name. He is a school teacher, or was, before the school was turned into an administrative office for men who issue orders in a language that lands hard on the ear. He has a face like folded paper and fingers stained with ink. He never says anything dramatic. He doesn't need to. In occupied countries, the dramatic people disappear first. He tells you where to stand, when to leave, what not to say. If they arrest you, he says, say less than you think. You nod. He studies you. Then less than that. You nod again, and this time he seems satisfied, though not impressed. You want to impress him. You want him to think you are strong, useful, made for this. But the truth is that every task leaves you trembling after the fact. You are brave only in retrospect. In the moment, you are mostly obedient to necessity. You deliver your first message by bicycle. No light, no conversation, no stopping unless forced. You leave town after midnight, the road barely visible beneath a slice of moon. The wind cuts through your coat. Your toes go numb before you reach the first farm. Dogs bark as you pass. Once, a curtain lifts in a dark window, and you see a face for just a second before it disappears again. People know not to see too much. That is one of the ways they help. Your message is sewn into the hem of your sleeve. If stopped, you are meant to say you are visiting an aunt whose husband is sick. You don't have such an aunt, but occupation teaches you that fictional relatives are sometimes the most useful kind. You arrive at a farmhouse before dawn. A man opens the door, holding a lamp low enough that it doesn't glow through the curtains. He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't invite you in. Was the road clear? You say yes. He cuts the hem of your sleeve with a pocket knife, removes the paper, and hands you half a turnip wrapped in newspaper for the road. That is the first payment you ever receive for risking your life. You eat it while riding home. It tastes like dirt and triumph. Soon you are carrying more than messages. A ration card forged in a basement, a map sketched from memory, a name that cannot be written down, small components for a radio hidden in sacks of potatoes. One night, a little packet of photographs tucked under the lining of your shoe, faces of people you do not know but are somehow already responsible for. This is what no one explains when they talk about resistance later, when they tell it like a story already polished by victory. Most of the work feels like errands. You wait, you carry, you watch, you lie. You become good at seeming harmless. That turns out to be one of the most dangerous skills you will ever learn. Your father is gone by then, taken 6 months earlier because someone heard someone say he listened to London on a hidden radio. No charge, no trial, just a knock at the door after supper, and his coat still hanging on his hook 3 weeks later, then 6 weeks, then 3 months, until the coat stops meaning he might come back and starts meaning he probably won't. Absence becomes a member of the household. It sits in his chair, it sleeps on your mother's side of the bed, it eats with you every evening. Your mother never asks where you go when you come home after midnight, or with mud on your hem, or with bread you shouldn't have been able to buy. She simply warms soup and says, "Eat before it gets cold." One night, she is mending one of your shirts by candlelight. The room is quiet except for the scratch of the needle through cloth and the sound of your spoon against the bowl. Without looking up, she says, "Your father used to think brave people were born different." You wait. She threads the needle again. He was wrong. That is all. But sometimes a life turns on one sentence, and that is one of yours. Marcel gives you your first real assignment in a cemetery. That is the kind of sentence war makes possible. You arrive carrying flowers you did not buy for anyone. It's raining just enough to be annoying, not enough to count as weather. And a woman in a gray coat stands beside a cracked stone angel, darkened by years of damp. She looks like a widow, which is to say she looks like half the women in Europe. Without greeting you, she says, "Your aunt still keeps chickens." You answer, "Only the mean one." She hands you a parcel wrapped in brown paper. It is heavier than you expect. You don't open it until you are home alone with the curtains closed and the radio turned off. Inside are explosives. You stare at them on the kitchen table while the room slowly dims around you. The table is the same table where your father used to trim his beard, where your mother rolled dough, where you once did arithmetic and complained that numbers had no real-life meaning. Now numbers mean everything. 5 bridges, 12 minutes, 3 kilograms, 1 train, 2 possible guards, 50 dead if the shipment arrives, or perhaps 5, or perhaps none. War is arithmetic done with missing digits. The sabotage is meant to be simple. Attach the charge beneath the rail bridge, set the timer, leave. Nothing in war is simple except the hunger. You go out after midnight with 2 others. One is Marcel, the other is a mechanic whose real name you never learn, because by then names have begun to feel like luxuries. The river below the bridge is black and slow, thick like oil in the dark. The mud sucks at your boots as you crawl under the structure. The iron smells wet and ancient. Marcel works with the wires. The mechanic watches the road above. Your job is to hold the satchel still and keep your teeth from chattering loudly enough to matter. From somewhere up the road comes the grind of an engine. Too early. The mechanic hisses a curse. Marcel mutters, "Not yet," but the engine grows louder. This is the moment you imagined wrong. You thought courage would feel like heat, like certainty, like stepping suddenly into your true self. Instead, everything inside you goes cold and still. The night becomes painfully clear. The river, the rust, Marcel's breathing, the approaching truck. You realize in that instant that bravery is not a feeling. It is a decision made while every feeling argues against it. You climb. It is not your task. No one told you to do it. That is perhaps why it works. You scramble up the embankment, slipping in the wet dirt, and stumble into the road just as the truck rounds the bend. You throw both arms in the air and shout before you even know what words you're shouting. The driver slams the brakes. A soldier leans out, furious. You point wildly down the road and babble that a tree has fallen. You say there's mud, a cart overturned, a horse injured. You speak quickly, stupidly, with the panic of someone who has just seen disaster and cannot organize it into proper sentences. You don't act afraid, you are afraid. That makes the performance almost effortless. The driver swears, reverses, and begins a grinding turn. For 10 seconds, maybe 12, he believes you. By the time he discovers the road is clear, you were gone and the bridge is already collapsing into the river. The explosion is nothing like you imagined. Not glorious, not cinematic. One brutal sound, then silence so complete it feels borrowed from another world. A flock of birds erupts in the trees. Somewhere, metal screams. Then even that is over. You spend the next 3 days vomiting. Marcel tells you the train never crossed. Ammunition was delayed. A German unit farther east went without supplies. He calls it a success. You nod, because that is the correct response. But all you can think about is the driver's face in the dim headlights. Tired, annoyed, human. For 10 seconds he trusted you, and because he trusted you, men he would never meet might have died farther down the line. This is another thing the stories leave out later. Resistance does not protect you from moral confusion. It intensifies it. There are no clean hands, only dirt arranged in layers. As the months pass, the work gets harder. A printer is arrested. A safe house is compromised. A woman you once met in a cemetery fails to arrive at a handoff point, and no one says her name again. You stop asking where people have gone, because the answers come in only 3 forms: prison, flight, or death. Silence is easier to carry. Then Marcel gives you the assignment you will remember for the rest of your life. Not because it is the most dangerous, not because it changes the war, but because it changes you. You are to escort a child. That's all. A girl of 8 with a cough and a red ribbon in her hair. Her parents have already been taken. She is to be moved from one village to another under the pretense that she is your cousin. You are to hold her hand, speak naturally, and above all, never let her see your fear. Her name is Eva, though of course that may not really be her name. You meet her behind a church. She is wearing a coat too thin for the weather and carrying a doll missing one eye. She looks at you not with trust but with evaluation, as if deciding whether you qualify as the kind of adult worth obeying. "Are you my cousin?" she asks. "Yes." She thinks about this. "I don't remember you. You were smaller then." This satisfies her, or at least bores her enough to move on. At the checkpoint outside town, a guard asks where you're going. "To my aunt's," you say. Again with the fictional relatives. The guard looks at the girl. "And this is my cousin." Eva coughs. The guard wrinkles his nose and waves you through, because even occupation has limits, and one of them is sick children. You walk another mile before you realize your whole back is wet with sweat. When you leave her at the farmhouse, the woman who opens the door takes Eva inside without ceremony. The girl doesn't wave. She doesn't thank you. She just disappears into the dimness of the house with her one-eyed doll tucked under her arm. You stand there longer than necessary, not because you were worried, because for the first time you understand that resistance is not only about destroying something. Sometimes it is about carrying one fragile life through a world designed to crush it, and placing it, however briefly, beyond reach. That is the 5-second change, though you do not know it then. Until that day, you thought you were fighting against the enemy. After that day, you understand you are also fighting for the possibility of gentleness. They arrest you in March, or maybe February. Time loses shape in prison. Dates become rumors. Someone talks. Someone always talks eventually. Perhaps under pain, perhaps under threat. Perhaps because they are weaker than you imagined or simply more honest about the limits of flesh. You are taken from the street at dawn by two men who never raise their voices. Professional men. Efficient men. Terrifying in the way that tidy desks are terrifying when placed inside brutal systems. The cell smells of damp straw, rust, and old fear. There is a boy in the corner, 17, maybe 18, with blood dried at the edge of his mouth. He keeps touching one of his teeth with his tongue, as if checking whether it is still there. You sit opposite him. He says, "Do you know how long they keep people here?" No, that is the truth. After a while, he asks, "Do they let people go?" You could lie. You could offer comfort. You could say, "Sometimes." Instead, you hear Marcel and your memory. Say less than you think, then less than that. You lean toward him and say, "If they question you, give them something small, something useless. Hold back the rest." He nods once. The next morning, he is gone. You never learn if he survived. That is war's ugliest habit. It leaves people unfinished inside you. When they question you, you do what you were taught. You offer crumbs, a dead name, an old address, a half-truth wrapped in confusion. You become dull on purpose. Fear helps. Pain helps more. The body is persuasive. It convinces the mind that survival is the only moral category left. And still, somehow, you keep enough back. Not because you are noble, because by then your silence belongs to more people than yourself. Liberation, when it comes, is not the clean sunrise people will describe later. It is noise, improvised flags, church bells rung too hard, men kissing strangers in the street, women crying in doorways, children running because everyone else is running. It is joy with dirt under its nails. Someone hands you a flag and you hold it because refusing would make no sense, but it feels almost ridiculous in your hands. Too neat, too symbolic. War has never once felt symbolic to you. It has felt wet and hungry and confusing and terribly specific. You walk home through streets you know and barely recognize. Windows are open, faces are uncovered. A portrait of the occupier lies trampled in the mud. Men who hid through most of the war suddenly have loud opinions about courage. You almost laugh at that. Almost. Your mother is standing in the doorway when you turn onto your street. She looks smaller than you remember, or perhaps the war has made everything larger around her. Grief, waiting, silence, age. For one terrible second, you think she might not know you. Then she says, "You're late." And that is when you cry. Not at the bridge, not in the cell, not at the bells, at your own front door, because she says it the way she used to say it before the world broke, as if lateness is once again the kind of problem a family can afford to have. Years later, people will ask what it was like to be a resistance fighter. They will want passwords and pistols and narrow escapes and speeches whispered in basements. Those things existed, but they are not the truest answer. The truest answer is this. It was a life made of tiny decisions taken under enormous pressure. It was pretending to be ordinary until ordinary itself became an act of rebellion. It was learning that courage rarely feels courageous while it is happening. It was bread in a bakery, a note in a pocket, a bicycle on a dark road, a child with a red ribbon, a mother who never asked questions she already knew the answers to. You did not wake one morning transformed into a hero. You became a resistance fighter the way most people become anything important, slowly, reluctantly, and then, all at once. One lie, one errand, one held breath, one choice to go anyway, even with fear walking beside you. And in the end, that is all resistance ever really is. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear have the final word.